For years, Earth lived under a quiet lie. People walked the streets, stared at screens, went to sleep under open skies all while being watched. Not by satellites or cameras, not by their own kind, but by eyes that didn't belong to this world. Eyes hidden behind cloaking fields and light-bending suits. They watched from rooftops, shadows, and even the clouds. The watchers were called the Valari, a race of cold calculating explorers from far across the stars. They didn't come to Earth to destroy, not yet. They came to study, to observe, like humans watching ants in a glass box. To them, humans were small, predictable, blind. The Valari believed their advanced stealth made them completely invisible to the people of Earth. They had studied dozens of planets, watched thousands of species evolve, and they had never once been seen. Earth was just another assignment, but they were wrong. One of them was standing on a rooftop in New York City. The sky was dark, filled with blinking lights from aircraft and towers. Below, the city buzzed with noise. The Valari scout adjusted its cloak and scanned the street below. It was watching a teenage boy walking alone, quietly humming. The boy stopped. Then, slowly, he looked up. The Valari froze. That was not possible. Its field was perfect. No one had ever looked directly at them, not like this. The boy's eyes locked onto the spot where the scout stood, cloaked in perfect invisibility. Then the boy did something even more impossible. He smiled. The Valara's heart, or whatever they called it, beat faster. A cold chill moved through its body. It stepped back, nearly losing balance. The boy didn't move. He didn't blink. And then, softly, the boy whispered something. It was a name. A name not spoken on Earth. A Valari name. Not a word in any human language, not in any human book, but it was the scout's true name. The sound hit the Valari like a strike of lightning. It stumbled, its cloak flickering for a second. The boy saw it. He definitely saw it. Then he turned and walked away like nothing had happened. The Valari dropped from the rooftop in panic and activated its return beacon. It needed to report this immediately. Back on the Valari mothership, orbiting Earth in high stealth, the scout knelt before its superior. Its hands trembled. Even its breathing was a strange thing for a Valari who were trained to feel nothing. The commander leaned in, listening carefully to the report. "A human saw you," the commander asked, voice calm but cold. He looked right at me. The scout whispered, and he said my name, my real name. That room had seen many things. Reports of planetary storms, hostile life forms, tech failures, but never fear. Until now, how could he know? The commander asked. "There's more," the scout said. He didn't scream, he didn't run, he smiled. That was worse than fear. The Council of Valari met in silence. They replayed the footage again and again. The cloak had not failed. There were no errors. The human had looked directly at the Valari, had whispered the name, and walked away. One counselor asked, "What do we do now?" Another answered, "We find out who this human is. We find out what he knows, before he whispers again." What they didn't know was this: he wasn't just a human boy. His name was Eli Mercer, and he had been waiting for this moment. For years, he had felt something was off. The way the air bent sometimes, the way shadows appeared where no object stood, and most of all, the dreams. Dreams of symbols, names, and eyes that weren't human. People called him strange, quiet, a boy who read too much, and spoke too little. But he had been watching, not out of fear, not out of confusion. He was waiting. And now he had seen one, confirmed what he always believed. They were here, and they thought they were invisible. But now, Eli knew the truth. They weren't hiding from the world, they were hiding from him, and somewhere, deep under the noise of the city, something ancient stirred, because a whisper had been spoken. A name had been heard, and it was only the beginning. Asterisk, no one could explain how he knew, not even Eli himself. He wasn't a scientist. He wasn't part of any secret project. He was just a quiet 17-year-old who liked to sit alone, draw symbols in his notebook, and read strange books that others ignored. But ever since he was a child, Eli had seen things no one else saw. At first he thought they were tricks of the light. Then, maybe dreams. But with time, those dreams became patterns. Patterns became visions. And then the visions became whispers. They always came at the edge of sleep. Faint sounds, words not spoken in any human language, symbols he'd never seen in a textbook. Some looked like stars, others like impossible machines. But one word kept coming back. Again and again. Velari. He wrote it down once and searched for it online. Nothing, not a single result, not even a myth or rumor. That made it more real. So Eli kept listening. One day, while walking home through the older part of town, he found something strange: a small bookstore that hadn't been there before. It was tucked between two empty buildings, with no sign on the door, and inside it was silent. The shelves were dusty, full of books with no titles, just strange markings. Most people would have left, but Eli stayed. His hand moved on its own, pulled a small black book from a high shelf. The pages inside were soft, almost alive. The writing shifted when he looked at it directly, but when he looked from the corner of his eye, he could read it. Not understand it, read it. He didn't take the book. He didn't need to. The words had already entered his mind. That's when things changed. He started noticing movements in the corners of rooms, places where the light bent wrong, moments where he felt a presence, but no one was there. And sometimes, late at night, he would hear it, breathing, not from behind the wall, not from outside, but right next to him, as if someone was standing there, watching, only inches away, but unseen. Most people would have panicked. Eli just whispered, "I see you," and something responded, not in words, not in sound, but in understanding, a kind of silent reply. That was when the name came. Not the word but an actual name. Soft, ancient, powerful, a name that vibrated in the air when spoken. He didn't know where it came from, but it felt familiar, like something lost was being remembered. So, when he looked up at the rooftop that night and saw the shimmer, he didn't feel fear. He felt calm. And when he whispered the name, and the shimmer jumped back, that's when he knew. He was right. They were real. And he could see them. But why? That question haunted the Valari more than Eli. Back aboard the hidden Valari ship above Earth, the news of the incident spread quickly. Many believed it was a trick or a system failure. Some thought the scout had imagined it, but the recording was clear. The humans saw the invisible. The council gathered again. They reviewed the report, analyzed the voice pattern. The name spoken by the human was accurate, so accurate it matched the inner code of the scout's identification implant. That information wasn't stored anywhere, not even in external files. It was impossible to extract, unless the human had help, but who could help him? They began a full scan of Earth's history. No trace of Valari interaction, no record of leaks, no sign of another. With species with that knowledge, it made no sense. Then a new scan revealed something else. Across Earth, other signals were rising, weak but similar. A low-level frequency that responded when Valari cloaks were nearby. The signals came from objects' old ruins, mostly broken, structures and forgotten places humans didn't understand. And in the center of those signals was Eli. He had visited some of those places, alone, quietly. He had drawn their symbols in his notebooks, symbols the Valari recognized, not from Earth but from lost records in their own archives. Now, the Valari were no longer calm. They feared exposure. They feared retaliation. But most of all, they feared that Earth might not be as young as they believed. That maybe it had been touched before. One council member suggested capturing the boy, quietly without alarm. Another argued against it. What if the boy was protected? What if speaking the name meant more than recognition? What if it was a kind of key? Back on Earth, Eli sat in his room, staring at the ceiling. He could feel them now. Not just the one he saw, but others. They were circling, trying to stay hidden. He knew they were watching closely, so he began to draw again. This time, not in symbols, but in maps, lines connecting ruins, patterns in the stars, places where the Valari had stepped and left marks. Without knowing, he followed their path. And somewhere deep inside, he felt something shift, as if an old door was unlocking, not just in the world but inside him. They thought he was alone. They thought he was just lucky. They didn't know. He was remembering. The skies above Earth were quiet, but something had changed. High above the clouds, the Valari ship drifted in invisible silence. To the human eye, there was nothing there. No reflection, no sound, not even a shadow. Their technology bent light, heat, and sound waves so precisely that the Earth below remained unaware. It had always worked. Every time. Every planet. Until now. One human had broken the pattern. Not with tools. Not with machines. With something far more dangerous. Awareness. Eli Mercer. He didn't run when he saw the alien. He didn't scream when he spoke its name. He whispered .com/certain, like he already knew what would happen next. And that was what frightened the Valari most. Inside the ship, the council of observers sat in cold silence. Their forms were tall, almost elegant, draped in flowing light that shimmered like water. The room glowed dim blue. Their minds were connected through silent data links. No sound was needed. The human saw. The human spoke. The human remembered. None of this should be possible. He must be contained, said one. No, said another. He must be understood. A third leaned forward. If he speaks one more name, others may awaken. So they made a decision. Not to destroy, not yet. They would send an agent, shadow-class Valari trained not to observe but to erase. The ship shifted slightly, cloaking even deeper as the agent departed. No trail, no signal, no trace. The perfect disappearance. Earth would never know, not if it worked. But Earth had already started to change. Eli was no longer at home. He had vanished from his old life, just like that. No school, no social account activity. Even his phone signal had gone quiet. To his classmates, he had simply moved away. His teachers received a sudden message from a non-existent guardian, but none of that was real. Eli was hiding. Not out of fear, but because he felt something growing around him. A tension in the air. A silent pressure pressing against his thoughts. He didn't know where it came from, but he knew what it meant. They were coming, so he kept moving. City to city, train to train. No pattern, no signal, just instinct. But the agents still found him. In an empty library in a quiet northern town, Eli sat at a table, studying a strange stone tablet he had found weeks earlier in an abandoned research site. The symbols were carved in curves and points, like constellations twisted into sentences. His fingers moved across them as if he had read them before, long ago. Then, the air shifted. Most wouldn't notice it, but Eli felt the weight of the room change. The sound of the world dulled, like a blanket was thrown over the earth. It wasn't sound, exactly. It was the lack of it. He didn't turn. He didn't have to. The agent stood just behind him, unseen by any other eye. Its form was slender, wrapped in pure shadow, almost humming with invisible energy. It had never failed a mission. It had erased memories, removed threats, and silenced voices across 100 worlds. It reached out, silent and perfect, and then Eli whispered, not loud, not rushed. Just one soft word. The agent froze. Because what Eli spoke wasn't a name, it was a phrase. A phrase written in the ancient Valeri tongue. A sentence no human could know, a command only the old voice could give. And yet, Eli spoke it. The agent's hand trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper — recognition. Its mission data shattered. The logic grid failed. The cloak flickered for just a breath of a second. Eli stood, still facing away. He placed the stone tablet back on the table, his voice calm. You've heard it before, haven't you? He asked softly. The agent didn't reply. It couldn't. Your kind buried this language, tried to forget it. But some things remember. The agent dropped to one knee, its systems resetting, trying to make sense of the impossible. Eli finally turned. His eyes weren't glowing. He didn't hold a weapon. He looked like any other human, and yet the agent didn't move. Because Eli had awakened something not even the Valeri understood. Outside the library, the wind picked up, birds scattered, streetlights flickered, and deep within the earth, something ancient responded to the phrase spoken aloud. Back on the Valeri ship, the command center filled with static. A transmission had been triggered, but not by them. The code was ancient. Not Valeri, not human. A signal repeating the phrase Eli had spoken. One of the council members leaned closer to the display. Where did that command come from? Another, replied voice low. Earth, but not from the boy. Then who? The room went silent, because the signal wasn't new. It had been echoing for years, waiting for someone who could understand it. And now, someone had whispered the key. The silent war had begun. Not with weapons, not with fire, but with memory. And Earth was no longer asleep. The wind across the empty desert didn't carry sound, only silence, dry and still. But beneath that silence, something was shifting. For generations, Earth had been a mystery even to its own people. Hidden ruins and jungles, strange carvings buried beneath ocean floors. Places no history book mentioned and no scientist could explain. The Valeri always believed humans were building on forgotten soil. But now they feared something much worse. Maybe humans weren't building over lost things. Maybe they were built from them. Back aboard the cloaked Valeri command ship, the silence in the council chamber had grown heavier. The data was undeniable now. The boy, Eli Mercer, had not just seen them. He had spoken a phrase in a language so old even their translation systems had gaps in its meaning. That language belonged to the first voice, a time so distant and so buried in Valeri memory that some considered it myth. But myth or not, the agent they sent to Earth had returned in failure, not destroyed, not erased, but changed, silent, frozen, and its cloak still partially deactivated. The Valeri had ruled over silence for centuries. They entered star systems, undetected, watched without trace, and left before ever being seen. But now one human had whispered, and 1,000 questions echoed in return. On Earth, Eli stood at the entrance of a cave he had never seen before, but somehow knew. The map he had drawn in his notebook days ago had changed. Symbols shifted as he moved. The ink darkened near certain locations, as if the paper reacted to something in the world. The cave was one of those places. Inside, the air was cool, heavy with age. The walls were smooth, not natural, but not made by any current human tool either. Shapes glowed faintly along the stone, only visible when Eli stepped close. His fingers reached out, not to touch, but to feel the hum beneath the surface. He was not alone. Two others waited deeper inside. Not Valeri, not enemies. They were humans, like him, but different. One was a girl no older than 20, quiet, focused, with a voice that echoed even when she whispered. The other was an older man, calm, thoughtful, with eyes that looked like they had seen too far for too long. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They too had heard the whispers. They too had once seen things no one else saw, and like Eli, they had been drawn to the same ruins. They had followed dreams, maps, frequencies, too strange for normal machines to pick up. And now, the three stood together, not because they planned it, but because something had pulled them. In the center of the cave stood a stone device, part machine, part memory. It looked broken, half covered in dust. But when all three stepped near it, the dust began to lift on its own. Lights formed patterns above the stone, not holograms, memories. Eli saw them, worlds spinning, stars fading, and shapes that looked like Terran ships, but older, sleeker, stronger. He didn't recognize the tech, but something in him did. The girl placed her hand on the stone. A whisper filled the cave. Awaken the sleepers. None of them spoke, because they all felt it. Weren't just discovering something ancient, they were standing in something meant to be found. And they were the ones it had waited for. Far above Earth, the Valari detected the pulse. Not loud, not violent, but present. A frequency older than their own language. It spread in a quiet circle. From the desert, bouncing off their shields, triggering systems that hadn't been touched in centuries, they traced it back. But the cave was shielded by something they didn't understand. Not a machine. Not a material. Memory. Something was remembering itself. Not as a planet. Not as a species. But as a force. The Valari Council grew nervous. They had believed Earth was passive, primitive, but now it looked like Earth was waiting. One of the younger analysts said something strange. I don't think the humans are discovering anything. I think they're returning. What do you mean? A commander asked. They're not unlocking ancient things. They're waking things that belonged to them all along. The statement hung in the air. Back on Earth, the cave began to change. The lights shifted. A new symbol appeared, a location in the mountains. Another place. Lost to maps, but familiar in the bones. The older man looked at Eli. We're not the only ones. Eli nodded. They're waking up, one by one. What if it's too late? The girl asked softly. Eli didn't answer. He looked toward the cave entrance. Outside, the stars were coming out, and somewhere far beyond them, a sound began to form a reply. Not from the Valari, not from Earth, from the places in between. From the ones who had left these whispers behind. And this time, the message wasn't a warning. It was a welcome asterisk. The night was unusually still. In a remote forest, deep in northern Europe, the trees didn't sway. The air didn't move. Even the animals had gone quiet. Something was in the sky too high to see, too quiet to hear, but its presence pressed down on the earth like invisible weight. The Valari had sent more than one ship now, and they weren't just here to observe anymore. Above the clouds, 6 cloaked vessels circled the planet slowly, like shadows orbiting a sleeping giant. They carried no weapons in sight, but their silence was sharper than any blade. Their goal was no longer study. It was control. Something on Earth had stirred something, even they did not fully understand. And at the center of it was Eli Mercer, a boy who wasn't supposed to matter, a human who wasn't supposed to know, and yet he did. He had spoken names that hadn't been spoken for ages, touched devices that should have never responded, walked through places that should have remained, sealed. And now, others were beginning to notice. Across the planet, small signs began to appear, lights flickering in empty places, forgotten structures humming softly at night. Children waking from dreams with images they couldn't explain. They were waking up, not just Eli, not just the others. In the cave. Humanity. The Valari didn't understand how or why, but it was happening. And what frightened them most was the speed. One day, Earth was a passive world under observation. The next it was responding. In the hidden cave system Eli and the others had uncovered, the air was changing. The structure that once sat quietly now pulsed faintly. Every hour, a new symbol appeared on its surface, as if unfolding a memory from the stone itself. It wasn't just showing coordinates, it was showing history. A history no one remembered but someone had preserved. Eli sat with the others, Leah, the girl with the strange voice, and Marcus, the man who always seemed to know what question to ask next. The three of them watched as new lines formed on the stone wall, connecting across a global map. But there was one location that glowed, brighter than the others: Antarctica. It wasn't a surprise. Even before the symbol appeared, Eli had felt something calling from that direction, a pressure, a pull, something he couldn't explain. This one's different, Marcus said, staring at the new mark. The others showed ruins, old machines. This feels alive. Leah nodded slowly. It's not sending us a message. Eli finished the thought. It's waiting for us to arrive. Far above, the Valari detected the energy spike from the Antarctic region. Their analysts couldn't trace its exact origin. The pulse didn't follow any known frequency. It was part heat, part magnetic disturbance, and part memory pattern. A kind of encoded thought. One counselor finally said what the others had feared. We don't know what lies under that ice. Another replied, that's not the problem. The problem is they do. Eli and his team didn't travel by commercial route. They moved through paths unknown to most, deep networks left behind by those who had come before. Forgotten train lines, caves that connected continents, and hidden elevators powered by light instead of electricity. The deeper they went, the more Eli remembered. He didn't know how he remembered. The thoughts came like dreams, then visions, then words, instructions, commands, not from another being but from something buried within his own mind. When they reached the final passage, they found it. A wall of ice, smooth and endless, covering what appeared to be a massive circular door, older than any civilization on record, and in the center of that door, HANDPRINT. Human. No carving, no symbol, just the perfect print of a human hand. Eli stepped forward. The closer he got, the louder the sound in his mind became. Not noise, a tone, a deep, low note, like something ancient trying to breathe. He raised his hand, placed it on the print, and the ice began to melt, not crack, not explode. Simply vanish. Behind it, the circular door lit up, section by section, with a language no human had ever spoken, but somehow, Eli could read every word. It said, "You are not the first, but you may be the last." The Valari command ship above Earth went into full alert. Every silent alarm triggered. Every system lit red. Not because of attack, not because of detection, but because of what they heard. A single transmission. Low frequency, hidden deep inside Earth's magnetic layer. It shouldn't have been able to reach them, but it did. And it carried just one line. "You watched too long, now we see you." The council froze. They had always believed they were the hidden ones, the silent watchers. But Earth had been watching back. Maybe not with eyes, not with ships, but with something older, deeper. And now, that thing was waking up. Not in anger, but in memory, because Earth had not forgotten. Asterisk above Earth. Silence cracked, not with thunder or alarms, but with presence, something vast and ancient brushing against the edges of the Valari fleet. Their ships, perfectly cloaked, drifted in orbit as they always had, untouched, unseen. But now, they weren't unseen anymore. The message had arrived, a quiet whisper across magnetic fields and quantum layers. It hadn't been sent by a satellite, it hadn't come from a device. It had come from Earth itself. "You watched too long. Now we see you." The Valari had studied thousands of species across the galaxy, each one unaware of their silent observers. No civilization had ever noticed their presence, let alone spoken directly to them through the void. Until now. Inside the largest Valari vessel, the command chamber shifted into lockdown. Every console blinked with unreadable energy spikes. The air itself seemed denser. Even the data felt heavier, like memory was being forced to the surface. The council members stood motionless, listening to signals that hadn't existed just days ago. "This is not human technology." One of them finally said. "No," another answered. "This is human memory." Down below, deep beneath the Antarctic ice, the great circular door that Eli had uncovered was now fully awake. Symbols danced across its surface like fireflies in orbit, forming patterns that matched star systems long erased from known maps. Inside, the walls weren't made of stone or metal, but something that with stored light. It wasn't a vault. It was a message, not to humans. For humans. Eli, Leah, and Marcus stepped through the threshold into a chamber that curved upward beyond sight. Dozens of pillars lined the path, each etched with carvings that showed human hands reaching into the stars, walking side by side with shapes not entirely human and not entirely alien. Leah whispered, "This is not history." Marcus replied, "It's a reminder." And Eli, standing at the center, placed his hand on the platform glowing in front of him. The chamber responded with a soft tone, like a bell underwater. Light swirled upward and gathered into a single image. A Terran ship? Not just any ship. It was beautiful, black and silver wings like crystal. No engines visible, just curves and angles that bent space around it. It hovered in a sky unfamiliar to Earth, surrounded by other vessels in formation. The voice followed. It wasn't a language, not even sound, just understanding, placed gently in the mind. "You left us behind. Now you return." Eli's heart pounded, not from fear, but connection. He wasn't unlocking a forgotten past. He was stepping into a role that had waited millennia. He spoke, softly. "Why me?" The answer came gently. "Because you remembered." The lights dimmed, and the platform lifted from the floor. It rose like a seed growing from still soil, and beneath it, a hangar. Empty, silent, but full of potential. One ship stood alone at the center, Terran design, sleek, waiting. It had not rusted, had not aged. It had simply paused, knowing one day someone would arrive to wake it far above. The Valari watched from orbit, their readings now chaotic. Magnetic fields surged in waves. Earth's energy signature was no longer stable, it was rising. "What is it doing?" asked one of the analysts. "It's activating." They turned their scanners toward Antarctica, but something blocked them. Not physical, not technical. Something their systems couldn't define. The young voice from earlier, the one who once warned the humans might not be discovering, but returning, spoke again. "This is not evolution," he said. "It's recognition." Below, Eli stepped toward the ship. As he approached, the hull opened, revealing an interior lit with gentle white light. The walls held markings he somehow understood. He didn't need training. He didn't need instruction. The ship recognized him. He turned back toward Leah and Marcus. "They'll come soon," Eli said. "The Valari will want to stop this." Marcus nodded. "They're already watching." Leah asked, "Then what do we do?" Eli placed his hand on the controls. The ship responded instantly, lifting softly from the ground, not with sound but with thought. Energy folded around it, not just cloaking it, but bending the space it moved through. He looked up, not at the sky, but through it. "We don't hide," he said. "We rise." At that moment, the clouds above Antarctica split, not from fire, not from sound, but from presence. The ship ascended, slowly, like a memory surfacing after being buried too long. From orbit, the Valari fleet detected it. One Terran ship, No heat signature, no broadcast, no aggression, but every sensor they had began to fail. Not because of the ship, because of Earth. Because of Earth was no longer quiet. It pulsed, it breathed, it remembered. And as the ship broke through the last layer of cloud, a second message rippled through. Every Valari system, you forgot who we were. We never did. The Valari didn't retreat. They couldn't. Their vessels remained in orbit, frozen in indecision, because now, they realized the truth. They had never been the ones in control. They had been walking across someone else's forgotten garden. And the gardeners had just returned.